Every semester, students say, I want to be a better communicator. I want to be effective. I want to feel like I'm getting through or making an impact. And our textbook has lots of tools. And in this course, we've walked through lots of tools to help you do that more effectively. But I will tell you, none of those are maybe as valuable as the one I'm about to share. When I became an instructor, I thought to myself, who were my favorite professors and what do I remember about them? And I had some really great ones, but I'll tell you, when I looked at all of them and I thought, one thing that they all had in common was that they told stories, and many of those stories I remembered. And so I decided I wanted to be a storyteller as an instructor. I wanted to implement storytelling into my lecture, but then I encountered something called the Moth Story Hour. It's a podcast online, but it's actually this incredible organization that creates live storytelling events. And on a dare, I attended one. And when you go to one, it's like a live concert venue. And imagine a massive karaoke situation, but instead of karaoke, it's just telling a story. And instead of you necessarily volunteering, you put your name in a hat. If they call your name, you get on stage. So long story short, I put my name in a hat. The nice man said, this is the biggest night we've ever had. There's a very small chance we'll call your name and you'll get to tell a story. But they did call my name, and I told a story. And what I didn't know is that they would judge my story. They would give me a score, and I would compete against 9 other storytellers. And when I won the storytelling event that night, sharing something really raw and vulnerable that happened to me, and I'll post the link to the story if you'd like to hear it, I would get to go on a journey of meeting other people who were experts in storytelling. And I would get to go on a radio show, and I would get to speak at some universities. So I want to share with you a couple things. I want to just spend a few minutes explaining why it is so powerful in communication. And then I want to talk about why, and not just why, but how you can use it. Because the caveat is, it's not just telling stories. They have to be told well. But let's start with the why. Why does it work? Well, I love this quote by philosopher James Stevens. The head does not hear anything until the heart has listened. We are feeling beings who think. Our feelings shift where we focus. So 2 things that it does with your audience, and when you're communicating, it engages your listeners, pulls them in, cognitively, but also, most important, emotionally, and it builds trust. So what does that look like? Well, let me give you just a couple really great facts about this process. We have found in the last 20 years that you are 20 times more likely to remember a story than a fact or statistic alone. It engages learners that are visual and kinesthetic and auditory. It engages so many different senses. So it is unbelievably powerful, and it really does stick. And how do we know that? Well, this is crazy, but in the last 20 years, we've been able to look at the neuroscience of storytelling. So while someone's telling a story, we're measuring chemicals that are being released in someone's brain. I hope that blows your mind. It does mine. There are 3 chemicals. So if you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. The first one's really powerful. It doesn't matter if you're telling a story on a stage or in an interview or on a first date. If you start it well, if you help your audience begin to care, they will release oxytocin in their brain. It's called the bonding chemical, the moral molecule. What it does is it makes them feel connected. So when you leave, they say something like, I like them, because it's neuroscience. So at the beginning, if you can do a good job of helping them care, it's why we have in Disney movies this character who's lost a parent, because it pulls us in, it makes them care about them. All right, the second one, when we're telling a story, and again, this is just why and how it happens, and we'll explain how to do it effectively to craft your story. But then we release cortisol. When we have a moment of conflict, when we have something that makes us feel like we don't know what's going to happen next, if it's a television show, our heart beats faster, we can't go to sleep, we feel the stress, and that releases cortisol, and now we're getting somewhere. So we're really engaged. Now, the final chemical that is released in this OCD cycle is dopamine, and that is where we get to the end and we go, oh, they got together. Oh, he got the job. Oh, he won the race. That's where we get what we call resolve or ends well. I often will say we tie a bow on it. So that's the neuroscience that happens. The other really beautiful thing that happens in the process of storytelling is this phenomenon called neural coupling. Our brains begin to mirror the storyteller's brain. So where I hold a memory of a story, now when you listen, you will hold it in the same place. So that story is now stored in your memory, the same place that I store it in mine. So that phenomenon of neural coupling is fascinating. We also have this thing called narrative transport. It means that emotionally, they go on a journey with you, and they're so engaged with you as the speaker that it feels like we are riding together in this. And if you were to jump on a roller coaster, they go through the twists and the turns, the ups and the downs with you. This narrative transport is what explains when we read a book, it feels like we were taken to another world. And so we can do that with the power of storytelling, not just in literature, but when we are communicating, again, from a stage, in an interview, even on a first date. So I want to review really quickly. If I were sitting with you in class, I would say 3 chemicals that are released in your brain in the process of storytelling. I want you to think about a story you have loved, and I'm going to ask you to break it down. It may be an episode in a television show or maybe a movie, but I'm going to ask you to identify an oxytocin, a cortisol, and a dopamine moment. I hope you enjoy this process of reflecting, and I cannot wait to share with you a practical strategy as you put together your own story for your narrative speech.